Hi everyone, we're going to spend some time today just briefly discussing kind of the basics of training that we do here, positive reinforcement, why we do what we do, how you can best set your dog up for success so that way when we roll into week 1 of training, we are all ready to go and we're all on the same pace. So, the Animal Rescue League utilizes positive reinforcement training for all of our animals, and what that really means to me in a nutshell is that we're taking a proactive approach to training rather than a reactive approach to training. So we're teaching our animals what we would like them to do instead of trying to correct the things that we don't want. So say your dog starts jumping on people and we want to try to help them learn to keep their feet on the ground. What we would do instead is we would start to pay them for having their feet on the floor. So we're taking that proactive approach. We're recognizing that this is a difficult behavior. These guys are really excited. They're super pumped to see new people. And we want to help them realize that keeping their feet on the floor is where the cool stuff happens. A big portion of positive reinforcement that we use here is actually clicker training. And what that click means and what we utilize that click for is to mark the exact moment that our animals are getting paid for. So say we're teaching our dog how to sit. The second that their rear end hits the floor, we're going to click, and then we're going to follow it up with a treat. Any behavior that continually gets reinforced is going to be more likely to occur. It's why we go to work every day. So as we continue to click and pay for that sit, it's going to become more consistent. And the ability of the click, it gives these guys something to seek, so they're listening for the click, and it cuts through the outside external noise a little better. But also, it gives us that precise moment that we can let them know this is the exact moment that I like. And then your treat delivery can be a little bit more relaxed because they know it's coming. And I find that this helps these guys out a lot because it helps them be less frustrated. We don't have to worry about getting that treat to them really quickly. We can kind of be more relaxed as trainers and handlers. And it's not as frustrating. These guys become more engaged. They're willing to participate. We're having a great time because we could see that they're actively engaging and they're having a wonderful time. And it's just overall fun. One of my biggest things that I say a lot in training is that if you're not having fun, then we need to take a step back and reevaluate. Because for the most part, if you're not having a nice time when training, it's likely because you're frustrated or your dog's frustrated. And if there's frustration anywhere, then we're not going to want to continue training. So if at any point you start to get frustrated or training no longer becomes fun, I urge you guys to reach out to us so we can kind of help you out. Where can we break it down a little more? Because we usually can. If we can't complete a full down and you're starting to get frustrated, maybe we can start to back it up and take little baby steps. So, of course, anytime at all, if you guys have any questions or you're feeling frustrated or you have anything like that, you guys are more than welcome to reach out, and my contact information will be scattered throughout the video here. They have done studies on the effects of clicker training in dogs and animals in general. And actually, the study itself showed that the sound of the click lit that MRI scan up more than the treat itself. So the click itself becomes innately reinforcing to these dogs, which is pretty cool if you ask me. So what we need to do as trainers is there are a couple rules because we want that MRI scan to continually light up. We want this to be something they seek. We want this to be a thing of joy for them because it's fun. And the couple rules are kind of as follows. If you click, you do always have to pay every single time. We won't be using the clicker forever. However, we're going to use the click to mark things that we like, to let them know that what they're doing is fantastic. If we click and we don't always follow it up with that reward, then it becomes a little bit confusing because I hear the noise, but I'm not always getting that treat, and then it becomes less valuable. We don't want to underestimate the value of that click because it is valuable. It's something that means something to these dogs. So if you click, you do always have to pay. Another good rule to keep in mind is that make sure you're only clicking once. So say you're teaching your dog how to sit, you accidentally click about halfway down and you go, gosh dang it, and then you click again when their rear end is completely on the floor. We know what behavior we clicked or what behavior we would prefer, but to these guys, they don't quite know. They're figuring it out. So if you end up misclicking and you accidentally click halfway through that sit, gosh dang it, give them a treat for that and then go ahead and pay them for the full sit next time. The benefit of positive reinforcement is we've got a little wiggle room. As long as we're paying the appropriate behaviors or the behaviors we like more frequently than those misclicks, then they tend to learn very rapidly that they're getting reinforced more for the full sit rather than those half sits. And at that same rate, if your dog does something super crazy awesome and you want to let them know that that was absolutely fantastic. Instead of clicking multiple times, what you can actually do is you can click once and then follow it up with multiple treats. So previously they click and you give them like $5. You click, you give them $5. This particular time they sat right on cue, off the verbal cue. That's fantastic. You're going to click and you're going to give them 3 or 4 treats, so $100 worth of treats. And using that to your advantage, I don't know about you, but if I get paid $100 for something that I got paid for $5 previously, I'm going to be more likely to do it again on that opportunity. I might get $100. So don't be afraid to jackpot your dogs when they do something super crazy awesome or when something gets hard and they do it for the first time. Some other tips and tricks that we have is making sure that you're rewarding good behaviors and you're also rewarding calm behaviors. Calm is the #1 behavior that we teach here. It's the #1 desired behavior because if you're not calm, you can't think, and if you can't think, you can't learn. It's like attempting to teach you calculus in a rock concert. You're going to be much more successful to do it in a quiet room than you will be in a chaotic environment. If their brain is chaotic, if you can tell that they're super, super excited, the likelihood of them having your attention and being able to bring them back down can sometimes be hard. So reinforcing calm and having the tips and tricks to bring them back to a state of calm can be super, super helpful. And this is stuff that we'll kind of discuss throughout class. Some other things is make sure we're setting our dogs up for success. Again, calculus in a rock concert. We want to make sure that not only the environment is conducive to learning, but what we're asking our dogs is conducive to learning. So if we're just now learning how to down, then the likelihood of us knowing how to lay down from a stand can be kind of difficult. So recognize where your dog is at in their learning, recognize how the environment is, and really just do your best as trainers to set your dog up for success. Kind of the opposite of what I just said, things to avoid doing, avoid clicking multiple times. Also avoid clicking for attention. Clicking for attention, although we know it's going to gather our dog's attention, say Fluffy is just cooking it across the yard, having a great time. We saw a squirrel, we're gone. And if you try to click for their attention, then think about what you're actually telling them. Remember, the click lets them know this is a good thing, you're going to get paid for it. I like that. So if you're trying to click for their attention as they're cruising across the yard, you're actually letting them know that was good, that was good, that was good, that was good, that was good. And then the next time Fluffy is cruising across the yard, then maybe Fluffy's going to cook it a little faster. We're going to run a little faster next time. So what I like to focus on in training is name recognition. If we can get a really, really good reinforcement history with their name, then we can use that to our advantage in those situations. Because we're taking a proactive approach to training, we do not physically or verbally punish or correct our dogs. We are taking that proactive approach. We're teaching them what we would like them to do. Alongside that, we do not allow the use of aversive training aids, merely just because we want these guys to be engaged, we want them to learn, and sometimes that takes a little bit of time, and you'll find that these guys stay a little bit more engaged when we're teaching them what we would like them to do. Other things to avoid doing is recognize that dogs are individuals the same way that we are. So don't expect your dog to learn at the same rate as other dogs. There was one class where it took me 5 weeks to teach a dog to lay down. And that's okay. Not everyone can learn calculus in a rock concert. I certainly cannot. Some people are good at math. I am not one of those people. And that's just like with dogs. So dogs learn at their own rate just like we do, and that's completely okay. Reinforcement. I'm going to kind of bring this up now just to kind of put it in your brain, and it'll kind of come out throughout the rest of class. Schedules of reinforcement. This is really how we get our dogs to keep doing what they do without having to constantly pay them with treats. In the beginning, we're going to pay them for everything that we like. You sat, thank you, here's a treat. You sat, I like that, here's a treat. Once we know that they know what sit means, and you're confident with it, I usually will say confident and consistently, and that to me usually means 9 to 10 times out of 10. If you can get 9 to 10 times out of 10 off a verbal cue for a sit, that's incredible. You know that they know. If you know that they know, then you can start to work at phasing out treats and phasing out the clicker. So when your dog knows how to sit and you know your dog knows, then you can move from constant reinforcement into scheduled reinforcement. So that means to me that would be 1 every 2 sits, 1 every 3 sits, and then 1 every 4, and 1 every 7, and 1 every 12, and 1 every 16. but you're really just, you're still paying them, but you're kind of working to phase them out. And then the last one is random reinforcement. This is why these guys keep doing what they do, is they're operating on the, well, that last sit, that wasn't quite good enough, but maybe this next one I'll get a treat. So that being said, we still want to randomly reinforce our dogs. If you ask your dog to sit by the dinner table and you're comfortable giving them a little snack of your dinner, well then yeah, I like that you sat beside me. I know you know how to sit, but I like in this particular moment that you did that. So don't be afraid to still randomly reinforce your dog, because you're going to keep those things strong. Again, anything that is reinforced will continue. So if we stop reinforcing, then we're going to see these behaviors start to phase out. Phasing out the clicker. The clicker is a training tool, and it's a tool that helps these guys learn. So back to consistency. If you're confident that your dog is consistent in a behavior, when you're confident that your dog knows, if I were to ask you, does your dog know how to sit? And you look at me and you go, yeah, then you don't need the clicker. What the clicker really means to me is it lets the dog know this is what this means. If your dog knows what sit means, do you need to tell them that's what sit means? And I would argue no. So if you ask your dog to sit off a verbal cue and they do it, then you can just follow up with a treat, and you don't have to let them know that's what that means. Some things to kind of think about is throughout training, some dogs will recognize the end of the click, or will recognize the click as the end of the behavior, while others will kind of think of it as a well done, kind of like a coaching. So as you work into your stays and as you work on building duration, you may have to think about what that clicker means to your dog as you start to build on the time spent doing things. Treats. So I've been talking about clicking, I've been talking about paying, and now we're on to treats. Our goal for treats is for them to be soft, small, and easy to eat, because we want to put them in a position where we can do many reps very frequently. The more repetitions we can do in a minute, the more learning that's going to happen. So avoid your crunchy treats, avoid your large treats. My rule of thumb is usually to have your treats no larger than the size of the tip of your pinky fingernail. If your dog is smaller, you've got a Yorkie, then that's going to be a very large treat. But really, you're looking for small enough for them to recognize that they're receiving a treat and for them to be motivated to get it, but not large enough where it's going to take them 5 minutes to eat it. Value of treats do matter. So if you asked me to touch a spider for $100, there's no way. There's no way you're going to get me to touch a spider for $100. However, if you told me I'd be a billionaire if I went over and touched a spider, I'll probably walk over there, give it a poke, and run away. So the values that you're using as reinforcement do matter. I don't expect my dog to recall off a squirrel for a piece of kibble. That's not good enough. So as things get hard and as things get difficult, I want to pay them for the difficulty, and I want to let them know that I appreciate that they're still hanging out with me. So my low-value treats, if you've got kibble-motivated dogs, you're more than welcome to use kibble. And that's just their basic dog food. So my low values will be potentially training treats if they're not super kibble motivated. If they are, then you can just use their dinners. Medium values would be regular training treats, maybe some soft and chewy and ones that they don't get all the time. And then your high value treats, I like to use hot dogs, cubed ham because it's already cut up. People like to cut up cheese sticks, boiled chicken. The world is your oyster for high value treats. But the biggest thing about high-value treats is that they're useful in their own right. So we don't want to constantly rely on them, because if things do get hard and you're constantly paying with high-value rewards, then what are you going to follow it up with? So you bring some medium, bring some low, and bring some high, so that way you have the ability to pay these guys for the difficulty that they're doing. And then if they do something crazy awesome, of course you can jackpot them with a high-value treat, but I'd rather prefer we have the mediums and the lows to use pretty frequently and consistently, and then make their dreams come true with a high value treat, than to rely on those high value treats. So that's really the basics with treats. Keep them soft and easy to eat, relatively small in size, and bring a variety of different values. Keep in mind that as environment shifts and context shifts, your treats are likely going to have to increase in value with that difficulty. Equipment. Like I said, we don't use physical or verbal aversives of any kind. So standard equipment for this class would be a 6-foot leash, and then just your standard flat collar. If you can see that little triad in the middle, those are actually martingale collars. And martingale collars are really useful for some of those dogs that like to squirm out the back of their collars. When that loop is not engaged, it acts just as your normal standard flat collar, but when it is engaged, then it prevents it from getting over those points behind their skull. And I find them to be super, super useful. I use them on all of my dogs. I just like that extra safety mechanism. If you have a traditional flat collar, you're more than welcome to use that. But really, standard equipment would be a standard 6-foot leash, a flat collar or a martingale collar. We do not allow retractable leashes. Prong collars, choke collars, pinch collars, anything like that. And of course, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out. All of our approved equipment is sold in our Animal House store here at the Animal Rescue League. And if you adopt it from us, you do get 10% off. Tips and tricks. So like I was saying earlier, make sure you're capturing and reinforcing calm behaviors. The more we capture and reinforce those calm behaviors, again, anything that's being reinforced will continue to occur. So if we're in a position to pay calm, your dog is sitting nicely beside you at the dinner table. I always ask people, is that something you like? They're not jumping on you. They're not trying to get your dinner. If you like it, pay it. Because the more we start to pay these sort of things, and the more we pay the things that they like, that we like too, then it becomes a little bit easier on them to think about. So I get paid more frequently for not jumping on the couch than I do for jumping on the couch. Maybe I'll get a scrappier dinner if I sit politely beside you. So thinking about opportunities you can reinforce can be super, super helpful. If your dog is really jumpy or really mouthy, sometimes the 3-second rule can be incredibly helpful there as well. And what that does is it gives these guys the opportunity to pair the behavior they're currently doing rather than the behavior they were doing prior. And the best example of this is polite greetings. So helping teach your dog not to jump on people. So instead of teaching them, I jump, I sit, I get a treat, I jump again, what we do is we jump, we ask them to sit, and then we count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Cool, there's your treat. So then the behavior that they're getting reinforced for isn't the motion of the jump, sit, jump. It's the sit itself. And I find this to be super, super incredibly useful for dogs that get really excited, for dogs that, 3-second rule is amazing for everything. The world is endless. But really, it gives these guys the opportunity to recognize that the behavior I'm doing currently and the holding of this calm behavior is what's getting me paid, not these jumpy, mouthy behaviors that we were doing previously. Another tip and trick is that dogs by nature are opportunistic. And what that means to me is really if they see an opportunity that will benefit them, they're going to take it. So it's why these guys get in the trash. It's why they eat poop in the backyard. It's why they do a lot of things. They're not out to get us. They're not out to ruin our day, whether it be unintentional. They're just here really for a good time. So for dogs that get in the trash, they got something cool out of it. Maybe they got a bone. They got to rip up the garbage can, tip it over. They got to scavenge for food. They got to rip up some paper towels. That sounds like, in dog terms, that's a pretty good day. They don't care if it's 5 minutes. They don't care if it's 30 seconds. If it is an opportunity that will benefit them, they're likely going to take it. This next one is kind of a big one, and it's not something that I even considered thinking about until I started working here, and I think it's a huge part of training. And it's the fact that dogs don't generalize. And what generalizing means is, say, when we learn how to drive a car, specifically an automatic, theoretically I can put any of us in any car and we could drive it. We may not be able to drive it well, but we can drive it. If we were to teach a dog how to drive a car, we would have to teach them every year, every make, every model, and theoretically every color, because the context shifts and the environment shifts. So dogs don't generalize. We have to teach them in a variety of different situations. Say I'm teaching your dog how to sit and you're sitting on a bench. If you and I were to switch spots, that context shift and that environment shift means something. Sometimes it's helpful to think that dogs and animals in general will think in pictures. So when the picture changes, the game changes. So what our job as trainers is to help these guys generalize is we need to practice in a variety of different pictures to not only set them up for success, but help them realize, oh, I do this everywhere, essentially. So keep that in mind, is context shifts and environment shifts do matter. If you're having a really, really good day of recall in the backyard, and you're like, this is fantastic, and then the next day you go out and it's not a very good day, sure, your dog could be having a bad day. They do have bad days just like we do, but take a look at your environment. Maybe there's kids playing next door, or maybe there's a lot of traffic driving by. So keep in mind of all the little stuff, because the little stuff can be big stuff to them. Everything in training in general is in the eyes of the animal. So even if it's not significant to us, maybe your dog is afraid of children. Children aren't significant to us, really, it's just a child. But if it's fearful to them or if it's significant to them, then it truly is significant to them. And thinking about that in training and how we can help them when we do run across significant things can be super, super helpful, because it'll give you guys the opportunity to help bring them back to calm. And then your relationship will just build on and it'll be great. And you guys will have more effective communication. And that's really what training is all about. How can I more effectively communicate with my dog to benefit our relationship as partners? All right, homework for week 2. So find what treats motivate your dog. Find your low value, your medium value, and your high values. Next week, when you guys come, we will pass out clickers, and we'll spend the beginning stages of class conditioning that clicker, making them realize that the sound of the click means food is coming. Now, at this point, if you guys are struggling with potty training or you're struggling with play biting or play mouthing or anything like that, then you can go ahead and keep finishing the end of the video. However, if you guys are good on both of those things, then that's all I have for this beginning stage of orientation. Of course, if you guys have any questions, then feel free to reach out to my contact information below. But if you have questions or concerns about potty training or play biting or anything like that, then stay tuned, because I will be talking about that in a few seconds. Okay, potty training. So one of the biggest things about potty training is timing and consistency. So what I find a lot of people run into is that everyone's got the right idea. They're taking their dog outside frequently. They're keeping an eye on him. They're letting them know that what they've done outside is a good job. But your timing matters, and your reinforcement is crucial. There are 3 big spots or 3 big times when you need to rush your dog outside. It's immediately after naps, because they're pretty docile at that point. They woke up, just like with us. We have a nap, we usually have to go to the bathroom. Immediately after playtime, just like with us, when we have a really busy day, by the end of the day, you're like, oh, I've been so busy, I haven't even had time to sit down. And they kind of do the same thing. They just don't think about it. Potty training, especially for puppies, is kind of like toddlers. Puppies in particular, is the best way to think about them is like toddlers. They don't really know they have to go until it's time to go. So it's up to us to be proactive with it and to recognize their signs when they do actually have to go. So the big 3 is going to be immediately after naps, immediately after playtime, and about 20 minutes after meals, so they have time to digest. When you do take your dog outside, give them time, spend about 5 minutes out there with them. And the reason for that being, especially after mealtime, is they'll probably go outside and they'll urinate within the first 30 seconds. But if they have to defecate or anything like that, they're likely going to spend a little bit more time outside. So if you let them go potty and they immediately come back in, they likely won't have that time if they have to do anything else. So spend about 3 to 5 minutes outside with them. For reinforcement, what I highly recommend you guys do is to reinforce the second that they're done. So say you have a female dog, the second that, and she's going to the bathroom, the second that her rear end pops up off the ground, you're going to give her the treat. So what you're actually paying is the behavior doing it outside. A lot of people will treat out the door, and although, again, you've got the right idea, you're paying them for coming back to the door and not necessarily urinating and defecating outside. So I highly recommend that the second that their rear end pops up off the ground, or the second that they're done, that's going to be the point where you give them that treat. This is what I like of you. This is great. If they do anything inside, go ahead and just clean it up. Don't make a big deal out of it. Your goal there is to make going outside so much more fun and so much more rewarding than going inside. And at the same rate, it's up to us to recognize if they do have to go, it's up to us to keep them on a consistent schedule. So if they do have to go to the bathroom inside and you wake up to it, or you come home and it's there, just clean it up and go, gosh dang it, I went a little bit too long. Because at that point, it's up to us. They're doing their best. They don't know. It's a learning experience. And whatever we can do to help them learn in a positive way can be super, super helpful. So timing does matter. If that means that you're taking your dog out every hour to be proactive, you're taking your dog out every hour to be proactive. Older dogs can obviously wait a little longer, but those puppies, every hour seems to be really good because they can't hold it for much longer than that. So taking that proactive approach, not pushing them to the brink so that we're debatably setting them up to fail a little bit, can be super, super helpful. So take them out every hour. If you don't have the opportunity to watch them, maybe they get crated for a little bit. If they don't go to the bathroom outside, maybe they come inside, they spend a little bit of time, and then 10 minutes later we go and we try again. Don't be afraid to kind of, if you have to attach them to your hip, so that way you can keep eyes on them. Feel free to do that as well. I always tell people a puppy that's out of your sight is probably up to no good. So if you've got to keep them in your sight to make sure that you can catch the little stuff that they do it in the beginning stages, because the more that we can reinforce these guys for going outside, the better. So timing matters, being consistent matters, where and how you reinforce matters. I always tell people that a success is a success, and the more we can make these successes a party, the more excited these guys are going to be to go and hang out outside and go to the bathroom outside. Because if every time they go pee outside it is a party, well, boy howdy, they're going to want to go outside because it's going to be a party. So use that reinforcement to your advantage. Use your high-value treats. Reduce their opportunity for them to practice that unwanted behavior. Keep them attached to your hip. Crate them if you can't keep your eyes on them. Another tip and trick that I have for potty training is to avoid potty pads or newspaper, because we don't want to confuse them in a way. So our goal here is to get them to recognize that going outside is the good thing. We want them to go outside. If we start to use potty pads and newspapers, then they're allowed to go inside, but only on these certain things. And frequently what I find happen in puppies is that they learn that, or they begin to think that even the outside of the pads is still in the clear. So then they mark like half on it and then half off it. And I think ultimately it becomes a little bit confusing for these guys, because we can pee in the house sometimes, but for the most part we want to go outside. But these couple things we can. So I would highly recommend not to utilize those, and then just work really hard on making going outside super, super, super reinforcing. If you guys have any questions, we do have a couple of handouts that I'm more than happy to email out to you guys. But if you have any questions, need help troubleshooting on potty training, you're more than welcome to ask your trainers during class, or shoot me an email, give me a call or anything like that, and I'd be more than happy to troubleshoot and see what we can do to help. Play biting and mouthing. So this is most commonly seen in dogs that get bored, or more commonly in like when they're super excited or we're super aroused. For puppies, play biting and exploring the world with their mouths is a totally normal behavior. Totally normal. They just don't know that they have shark teeth in their mouth. They don't know it hurts that badly. So what we need to do is we need to help them realize that, hey, that hurts. And then also at that same rate, we need to teach them a more appropriate response. So yes, I can see you're getting excited, but how can I, A, reduce that opportunity of you getting to that point of excitement, or how can I reduce the opportunity of myself being a plaything? So reduction of opportunity is super, super helpful there. What I sometimes like to recommend to people is making play almost like a roller coaster. So with my parents' dog, we taught him almost like a break cue. So we'd play tug. I would recognize and be like, you're getting a little worked up. Your brain is starting to shut off a little bit. Let's build in a break cue. So then when I told him to chew, that would be his time to decompress. He could chew on his rope. He could offload some of that stress into something productive like chewing. And then when he was ready, I'd ask him if he was ready, and then he'd pull back, and then we'd continue play again. So you're making play more of a roller coaster instead of just to build on energy, and then they hit the top of that roller coaster, and then they're gone. And then their brain shuts off, and no one's home, and you're sitting there like, where did my dog go? Where is my dog? And at that point, you probably recognize that you can't capture their attention. They're not taking food. There's just like you have this dog that you can't control at that point, because they're just clear up at the top of that roller coaster and they've hopped off. So keeping things like a roller coaster I find is super, super helpful. There are a couple things that I think can sometimes be helpful. Consistency is super, super key. So if you don't want your hands to be play toys, then your hands cannot be used in play. Anytime that you feel teeth on your hand, then we're done. So making sure that if we're asking something of our dog, we're being consistent in our ask. Our criteria is consistent. So it's not sometimes you get to play with my hands. If you don't want to feel teeth on your hands or your body, then we're not allowing teeth to be felt on our body. We're going to find better options for you. So reduction of opportunity is big. Making sure you're consistent in your criteria is also super helpful. Use breaks to your advantage. And the big three that I find works the best for mouthing, play biting, is redirecting onto something appropriate. So if they're starting to get mouthy with your hands, then maybe they go take that toy and we go play with the toy instead. So you go stuff a toy in their mouth and then we play with that. Your hands aren't okay, but here, take this toy. This is actually okay. You're welcome to bite this. The owl approach can sometimes be helpful. I've seen dogs where sometimes you say ow and then they're like, oh yeah, and it almost becomes more of a game. But really what you're doing is you're putting them in a position where you're helping them recognize that what they're doing is a little bit too much. So your puppy or your dog's getting really mouthy. The second you feel teeth, you can go ow, almost like it hurts really, and that usually will put them. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, and then you can redirect them with the toy and be like, that hurt, but maybe go do this instead. The owl approach can be helpful. But for some dogs, it does rile them up a little bit more, so take that with a grain of salt. I don't want you guys to use the owl approach and then get them all riled up, but I think it's a good starting moment. If you tell that that's getting them more excited and that's something that we want to do more with, then go ahead and just skip that one, because we want to make sure, we want to do our best to bring them back to calm when we are in this state of excited arousal. The game over approach is something that I recommend to a lot of people. And it's really, in its simplest form, the second you feel teeth on skin, game over. So you're playing, the second you feel teeth on skin, play is done. You're petting, the second you feel teeth on skin, pet is done. And that helps them realize if they like to be pet, if they like to play, that the only way these things continue is if I keep my teeth off you. Some dogs will try to follow you and nip at your heels and go for your heels. What I usually do there is you can remove yourself from the situation if removing them from the situation isn't productive. So that may mean you lock yourself in a bathroom for 20 to 30 seconds to give your dog a time to offload and decompress a little bit, and then you come out and try again. I wouldn't be afraid to use timeouts. So timeouts aren't necessarily something that are bad or should be bad. It's just you're too much right now. Your brain is running way too quickly. No one's home. Your brain is starting to shut off. I'm going to put you in a place where you can safely decompress. And that may mean you go get a favorite toy and then we go get put in our pen, or we get a favorite toy and we go in our crate. So you're giving them something productive to do. You're just making it a thing that happens. I wouldn't worry about scolding. I wouldn't do anything like that. Just make it a thing that happens. So, you're being a little too much. Why don't you take your toy and go hang out in your crate for a little bit? Once they start to decompress and they start to settle a little bit, then of course you can release them back out. But what I like to use timeouts for isn't not as a bad dog thing, but as your brain is running way too quickly right now. It's time for me to help you out. It's giving them the time to decompress and slow their brain back down when it's running too quickly, and you're not in a position to redirect them, or their brain is too far gone and it's shut off at that point, and you can't physically hand them treats or redirect them or things like that. So don't be afraid to use timeouts. Don't be afraid to use breaks. I make my timeouts no longer than 10 minutes because they really should be calm down about 10 minutes. What you're really looking for is just the reduction of that energy, and you can start to tell that they're calming down. So reduction of opportunity is huge. Make sure you're consistent. Don't be afraid to use your timeouts through your breaks. I think utilizing play or exciting things as a roller coaster is super helpful. And then use the owl approach to your advantage, redirect like crazy, and then use the game over approach to your advantage. I think game over works very well, and it helps them realize that it's not a bad thing, but the only way that the things that I like continue is if I keep my teeth off. Of course, I'm happy to troubleshoot this one as well. If you have any questions, want to chat a little bit about what's going on, you're more than welcome to reach out. The biggest thing about play biting is doing our best not to make it a game. So that may mean you turn into a tree or the dog doesn't exist when we start doing all this stuff, because anything, any push down, any pulling of limbs, pulling of clothing can sometimes become more of a game. So if our brain does start to shut off, if we do start getting really excited, really worked up, then how can we be as least reinforcing as humanly possible to help get your brain to shut off? But outside of that, that is all I've got for orientation videos. You guys are more than welcome to reach out with questions or anything like that. A lot of this stuff will make more sense as we get farther into class and you start to apply what we've talked about today practically. But if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call. I am happy to chat training at any time. But if not, we will see you for training class. And thanks for registering, and thanks for supporting the Animal Rescue League.